Okay, hello again everybody. I am doing a video today on what is arguably the best flathead small screwdriver. Now if you've done any type of locksmith work whatsoever, you completely understand the need to have a small screwdriver. Used from everything from actually unscrewing small screws to prying to wedging and lifting, and I'm sure many of you have also gone through and purchased various forms of small screwdrivers. So today, if you have not done so, I'm going to try to save you a little bit of headache. Now I will say that everything up here will work absolutely fine for the most part when you need a small screwdriver. So you can use any number of things up here, any number of the brands. I've got Husky here. I've got a general cheapy one with the different sizes. I've got a very common, just a bit holder. It holds a few in the back. I've got the 4-pack of Klein that is about a $25 pack, and this is my favorite one. I'll go ahead and say that right now. I have a couple of Ace Pro series. I've got a channel lock brand, a few different generations of Craftsman screwdrivers, and also over here I've got a couple multi-tools, one of them being my Super Tool 300 that I carry on my side, and another being the Rebar, which is the smaller cousin of this. So just to get started, the number one main reason that you need a small screwdriver, number one, number two, is for mortise locks on glass doors. If you do any type of commercial work, you are going to need to unscrew the set screws that are always flathead that hold your cylinder in. So that being the number one, this being the number 2.5 version, is mortise cylinders that use a flathead screw to get to hold the cam on. Those are your two main reasons that you need a flathead small screwdriver. Small being like a, I think they call it 3/16 or 5/32 tip. Different people call them different things. But we're going to talk about the slight differences in all those and why I consider the somewhat expensive 4-pack, even though I don't often use two of them. I only really pretty much use the one, but I still consider this the best ones to use, and I will explain why. Most of the screwdrivers that you're going to find, we're going to hold up Husky here, and we're going to see the tip of it. And you see how it flares out into that diamond shape? Here again, flares outward. The smaller Husky, same way. The Craftsman, longer, same way. And you can see here that I've ground the edges down. And this broken channel lock that broke pretty much immediately, we will focus in on the tip and see that the tip is broken. And bent, I might add. Do not like this one. Now the Ace Pro series came, I've got two of those. One of them I broke the tip and I ground it down. But the other one is how it comes, and you will see compared to other designs that it is not a flared out tip. It actually is pretty smooth on the sides. However, the tip itself is not quite wide enough for what we need it to do every day. And the general, these are kind of pieces of junk, while that screwdriver tip is not flared out and is allowed to go into a recess. If you have a screw this exact size, taking for instance this Adams Wright style door, narrow style lock, some situations require that you keep on screwing and you get I'm not going to do it too far. But you see this hollow right here where the screw was. If the screw is recessed and you walk up on that with your Craftsman with that flared tip, guess what? It's not going to get in there. It may tighten it down to most places, but if you know this is a non-standard screw or any type of locking mechanism where the screw, the grub screw or the Allen head screw goes all the way down, not Allen head, flathead without a head, sinks down, any of these types of screwdrivers are going to not go in. Now we go back to the Ace Pro series. The Ace Pro series, whoops, oh no, don't lose that. The Ace Pro series will recess into that. We'll do this side because it's not flared out, so that makes it good for this use. But when you come across to your mortise cylinder that may have the flathead screws and we put it in there, we see that it really doesn't, going in and out of focus here, but we can see that it really doesn't kind of fill up the head of that screw like it really could. So then you go back to your flared head, which does a wonderful job. Gets right in there, pretty much just wide enough for what you need it to do. But again, it won't work in recess situations. So that brings us to the 4-pack of screwdrivers that you can find at the orange box store. And again, it's about 25 bucks for the 4-pack, which is crazy expensive. But considering just one regular screwdriver is $10, I guess it's not that crazy expensive. So in that 4-pack, you get a #1 Phillips. The #1 Phillips does work for your mortise cylinders with Phillips screws. However, if we zoom in, it does not work perfectly great. It would work, but it's just enough off. So while you're working a bind, I always buy a bigger #1 screwdriver, which from the same company, Klein, sits in it better, has a bigger grip, so when you're trying to break a screw free, like this one that I'm trying to do freehand, which is not working real well, or a Craftsman brand #1, which I don't have one of those out here. So while this comes in the pack with 4, I just kind of keep it for an emergency #1 Phillips screwdriver. It would be good on the bar door locks made by Old Arrow, where you turn the key and it exposes the hole and you can use it. You can't use a number like a #2 Phillips that you would normally be carrying. Might be good for that instance. Except you do have it recessed. So if you have one of those, the Arrow deadbolt that I was talking about, you know, something like this wouldn't work because it's not going to reach in there. So that brings us to the 3 flatheads that come with this one. There is a tiny one, little bitty tiny, which I pretty much just use as a poker or grabber. It is pretty much just about the right length to be able to like hold it in your hand and do stuff with. Not a lot of use for this one. The next size up is also a pretty thin tip, just a bit bigger. And it is longer. And that is also comes in handy mainly for telescopic bolts. And telescopic bolts are found on old glass doors when it's called telescopic because when you throw it out, it telescopes out like that. When you run up on these or have to install them, you have smaller headed screws, and also frequently you do have to recess it down in there a little bit, or there is a cover plate that goes over the edge of the door that covers this lock, and sometimes there's, if you're lucky, somebody had drilled holes where these screws are. So if you're trying to use one of these bigger, more triangular shaped head, that is not going to go through the hole. That's, for the most part, not going to go through the hole in that aluminum face and you end up having to snap the whole face off the door or unscrew it. It takes like 10 screws to hold it on. So if you're lucky enough to have a hole already where the screw retainers are, you have a narrower screwdriver that will go in, which this brings us to the last one, which is the most used one, the one that I have broken a few of, which irritatingly forces me to go buy a whole new pack. And you will see that we are perfectly flat. There's no flare out at all. Now this one does not work well on these screws. On the telescopic bolt, it will work if I kind of shove it in there, but it's best to have a little bit smaller one. This one will work perfectly fine on your mortise cylinders. Almost perfectly fine. See that it is pretty well seated on that screw. And it will work absolutely wonderfully. You can see that we're perfectly seated there as well. And if it does have to go into the recess, it will just barely get there. Usually on these, they recess just under the surface because it falls in the groove in the cylinder. So this is pretty much exactly the same size. If I kept screwing, that's going to kind of mess with the threads right there. But you very rarely on the narrow style locks have to sink it further down than that, unless you have a super wide groove, super deep groove. But for the most part, you're going to be sinking it just below the surface. And when you have one of these, this one's been modified to make work. I put it on a grinder, but you can see that it kind of stops just above that. And obviously if you had a unmodified version like this one, it pretty much stops right there at it. So if that screw has to go any deeper, not great for it. This brings me to the Super Tool 300, and I've talked about this in its own video about multi-tools in a locksmith. The Super Tool 300 has an absolutely excellent flathead screwdriver. Now you want to kind of be a little bit more cautious with it, maybe use it only in emergencies, because small flatheads are always going to be the first to break, and while Leatherman has a warranty, you don't want to be without your tool. So I kind of only use this if I'm like, dang it, I don't have a screwdriver with me. Strangely enough, the rebar, which is the smaller cousin, you can see comparatively it is cut different, and the rebar has kind of a little swoop out there. It kind of angles out on one side. Not sure why they did that, but it does affect how recessed this will go into a hole. If you want to check out the multi-tool video, I'll try to get that in the link too, just so that you can see it. It's kind of an older video. But between these two, the rebar or the Super Tool 300 is my preferred, even though it is heavier, simply because of that right there. Now I could put that on a grinder and, you know, knock it off flat, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. Plus, it's just feels a little bit better in my hand. So again, the last thing I think was this. It's kind of troublesome finding bits that are small like this. When you do find them, they will work up to a point, but they'll kind of get underneath there. But the good thing about the small ones of these is you can have a number 1, you can have this one, and you can even squeeze in one more, like 3, 2 in the handle, 1 in the thing. And here I have a number 2 Phillips, a number 1, or a number something flathead bigger. And I leave this number 1 in there simply for the retainer screws here. Don't really use it a lot with this. I've kept it separate. So again, just to finish this off, the last thing that you use a screwdriver a lot for, obviously, is prying clips off. So this screwdriver, while any of these would work for that circumstance, obviously, The length of this, kind of perfect, fits in your hand. You can use it on the clips that go around by holding your thumb on one edge. You're kind of wanting that clip on the clips that'll spin around freely. I just stick my thumb in there to try to stop it, and then lever like that and bring it off. So that's pretty much, aside from any other number of uses you can come up with for a small flathead screwdriver, that is now my presentation on my arguably favorite screwdriver, which would be the largest flathead in the 4-pack of Klein that cost about about 25 bucks. I don't think I left anything out. If you have any questions, if you have any ideas, then by all means let me know in the comments. And it's good to have screwdrivers, you know, 2 or 3 different kinds is always good to have, for different size screws, because you don't want to, you know, break a head of a screw or not be able to get it in right or tight enough. So again, thanks for watching, guys, and y'all have a great day.